Hey everyone, this is Ash on Comics. My name's Ash, and this is a comic. This week, it's a review of Man of Steel number 4 by Brian Michael Bendis, with art by Kevin Maguire, and a few pages done by Jason Fabok, Alex Sinclair on colors. I did a previous review on issues 1 through 3 combined that hopefully you took time to watch if you're watching this. I'm going to give this review assuming that you have, and let's get down to it. This is Man of Steel number 4. Like I previously mentioned on the other review, this cover, or these covers, sometimes they don't really line up with what's going on in the book. This doesn't really happen. I'm not sure why this is here. It's a cool cover. I don't have a problem with the cover itself, other than I think the cover should kind of be representative of the pages inside. Also, like I previously mentioned, this startup page, this setup, I love what they're doing. This time, no planet, but it's Superman's eye. Follows the theme. Kind of gets you set up and going. In a weekly comic like this, is week to week, you don't really forget the story so much. Monthly issues can be a little bit more different. You're like, wow, what's going on? I can't remember. This would pull you kind of back in more, but it's great to have either way. The splash, 2-page splash, it's gorgeous. I love it. Love it. Love that that's a drawing of Metropolis and not some photoshopped picture of New York. Oh man, I can't stand when I see that, when you see illustration of a character and the backdrop is like a photo that's been, some filter's been put on to make it look like it was a drawing, but it clearly is not. Terrible. Anyways, I'm not going to go through page by page to tell the story of the book. The book pretty much goes like you'd expect it to. And that's not a bad thing. Not at all. Too many times I see stories get a bad rap for not being original or being a copy or what have you. The biggest one that comes to mind is Avatar by James Cameron. And that's one of those films that seems to be very polarizing. Some people love it, myself. Some people don't want to give it the time of day or just want to mock it or whatever and call it, Fern Gully or Dances with Wolves in Space or whatever things that they do. And what's funny is those films themselves aren't necessarily original. Then you also have films like Star Wars, which Lucas copied off of Akira Kurosawa. Not copied, but heavily inspired by Akira Kurosawa, specifically a film, Forbidden Fortress. The problem that I have is that you shouldn't be judging stories like that because it didn't surprise you and you knew it was going to happen. Judge the story on the execution. Star Wars, I love, huge fan, because Lucas not because he told something super original, but because he executed it on a level that arguably still hasn't been done today. Avatar, same way. People can laugh all they want. I'm going to say, whatever. That film is so expertly crafted. Superman, this book, this series is kind of like that. It's not going to wow you with like, oh wow, I'm totally surprised, didn't see this coming. But what it is going to do is just feel like, oh, this just feels so well done. It's a quality. And that's what I really appreciate about this book. If I'm going to praise this book, is to say that Bendis right now is telling a pretty straightforward story and just using his experience and skills as a writer to tell it the right way, to bring the reader on for a wild ride, and by the end, hopefully, by the end of issue 6, to say, wow, that was a fun story. I really enjoyed. So back to the book. One of the things that I was pointing to in my previous reviews about the book was this moment here, which is the end of issue 1, and the book, the narrative keeps kind of coming back to this scene and what's going on. You don't know as a reader, and you get to see some guy in the shadows. Who is this? And it turns out, spoiler, this is Jor-El. Now, I've explained in the past that I am by no means a DC expert. I am not here to talk about comics from the standpoint of I know everything about DC. Hardly the truth. I am a total DC noob. I know quite a bit about Marvel a couple decades ago, but that's beside the point. From what I know of DC, Jor-El is supposed to be dead. Now, maybe there's some sort of plot device going on. Maybe there's something in the DC multiverse that I'm not aware about. This isn't really Jor-El, or this is Jor-El, but it's like a facsimile, and not the, actual living incarnation of Jor-El. I don't know what. I'm presented at face value that this is Jor-El, Superman's dad. And if that's the actual case, I have problems with this. I explained in my previous review about Kandor getting destroyed, and how much I really like that as a plot device, because it serves to be such a villainous act to be like, oh my gosh, the bad guy just wiped out an entire city of people, which also happened to be the last remaining living souls of Krypton. It's a great motivator for Superman and Supergirl. It's also a way of getting rid of that, because Superman, as I explained in that previous review, is just diminished. For every single Kryptonian that's alive, that's not Superman, diminishes him. In my opinion, if I was in charge of DC, there would only be Superman, and there would be Zod, and that would be it. Because you can have another Kryptonian alive if he's the antithesis of Superman. But you can't have other Kryptonians like Supergirl running around being just like Superman without diminishing Superman. But I digress. I don't like this. It's not done poorly. And again, there might just be something to the overall DC world that I'm not understanding. So I don't want to say the book's trash because of this. I just subjectively really didn't like that they went this way. Obviously, they had to get rid of Lois and Jonathan Kent. Bendis has been working on stories, I imagine, for quite a long time before coming to DC. I don't think that he got hired with DC and then just started writing stuff, because if he did, he should have just been writing within the current continuity. I believe he was writing within continuity that existed, maybe even before New 52. I don't know. So this all has to go away to fit in his story that he wants to tell. Fine. Moving along. Again, I'm just zipping through stuff. I don't want to just tell you everything. Really, this is something you should read yourself. Giving it a huge thumbs up if that's not apparent. This is my favorite panel spread of the book. I love, hopefully you can see well, just the detail. This shot here. This is a great use of this too. I mean, you could have just used this to have these two characters, highlighted, but the scene of what's going on. There's definitely some major tragedy going down. This little part here in the background where you've got, police trying to clear the streets and everything, keep people safe, and they're saying, okay, everyone, back up, out of the street. Has anyone seen my cat? And in and of itself, it's kind of pointless, but the way that it's used and how it goes into the story reminds you that there's real people. And combined with Kevin Maguire's art, this lady, it's not silly. There's a human aspect to it. It just made me feel kind of like have a smile on my face just seeing this. And the flavor that I mentioned is so important in my last review. It's there. And it's not overdone. Bendis writes this. It's a backup little thing. I mean, it's not important for you could skip this and it wouldn't detract from the story, but this one little piece, and he's done. He's not, putting it in every little panel and being cheeky and overdoing it. No. And that restraint is, again, I think, in my opinion, a sign of good writing. You get the characters interacting, and this is something I love. Kevin Maguire's so strong at is facial expression. I didn't appreciate enough when I was younger, being into comics. In the 80s and 90s, comics were all about pinup art and anatomy and just making cool-looking people in tights. And facial expressions were something that few of the hot artists could do. But Kevin Maguire, solid. And it's something now as I'm older, more mature, have many more comics under my belt, the ability for an artist to tell story in pictures, like this panel right here, if this were generic hot artists of the 90s, this would be a blank expression and you'd have to have some little dialogue box or thought balloon or something explaining how the character feels or what he's thinking. But in this panel, you don't. It's I can't overstate that enough of how important that is. And I hope if you're a reader and you're a fan of comics that this is something that you appreciate as well. I hope. If it is, I think you'll get a lot more out of the good comics that some people just overlook and don't understand what they're missing. This sequence right here is wrapping up the story. Superman comes back to his Fortress of Solitude, and every single panel here is a facial expression going through the emotions, and you can just imagine what's kind of going on through his head as Rogol is, preparing to have Superman meet his maker. He's lifting his axe. Superman is putting A and B together, and it's just like, yeah, I've had enough. Boom. The finale. Very interesting in this part. If I am correct, this very seldom seen use of power is what killed Superman the last time. So to use it now, we'll see how Brian handles this. This has me going, oh my gosh, last time Superman was in a big thing, did this. This caused him to be no more. In fact, the current iteration of Superman, if you didn't know this, is actually the Superman from a previous multiverse. It's not the Superman from this actual multiverse, because this Superman's multiverse is dead. It's a big scene. I like it. It wraps things up nicely, and puts a bun on it. Man of Steel number 4. It's a definite recommend. This was issues 1-3 were a great setup, and this is like the cleanup hitter. Just hit it out of the park. My only critiques on this is that it feels a lot fast. By that I mean, I read through this, and when it was over, I was like, that was like 10 pages. It felt like nothing happened. And there's a couple reasons for that. Number one, it's a well-told story, and you're not bogged down with filler pages that remind you that, hey, this is an extra page that doesn't need to be here. If you read, I'm not even going to say bad comics. If you read mediocre comics, you've done this. I'm sure everyone, if you read comics, you do this. You get to these filler pages, and you're like, why are these here? This isn't even interesting. Move on with the other part of the story. What that's doing is subconsciously reminding you that this is another page that exists. The pages that you forget about, those were the good ones. Those are the ones you blurred right past because you were so into the story. The other reason is because Kevin Maguire's art he's so adept at allowing the writer to tell the story with just pictures. And most readers, myself included, even though I really try not to be, I think you diminish your experience. You'll blur through panels that have no dialogue or just no text, and you shouldn't do that. You should, in my opinion, try to pace yourself. Try to treat the comic as like a movie that every panel has its own sort of like time, a similar time that you spend with it, so that it paces out. It's difficult to do, I know. I am so guilty of it, but I'll tell you, man, when it's a good book, and if you dedicate yourself to doing that, I think you will really enjoy the book even more than you would have. This is a good recommend. I can't wait for the next book, and I really, really hope, crossing my fingers, that issue 6 wraps this all up and it feels like a solid piece and not like, oh, it just petered out at the end. Always makes me worried when I come across something like that. But let me know what you think. Sorry that this went on so long. I feel like the good review should be quick. That's what Diversity in Comics, he's always like, it's a good book, so I just blasted through it. But I like talking about good comics. I love this is why I buy the books. I don't want to read garbage. So thumbs up, and let me know what you think. If you didn't like it, by all means, tell me why, and hope you come back for more. Thanks.